what would you say is the greatest difference in education between Brazil and Russia? Because here in Brazil itself, we have many differences between education systems. For example, I believe in most universities we still have the very traditional way of the professor stands there in the front and teaches things, and pretty much the students hear it and learn, at least in theoretical matters. Of course, when you're talking about examining a patient, you're not going to do it this way. But there are many universities that use a different system that's more based, for example, on the student goals and studies a subject and then presents it, for example. So here, even here in Brazil, and I believe this is true of many countries, especially in upper education, higher education, we have significant differences. Are you able to point the major differences between Brazilian and Russian education? Can you give clear examples of how it leaves you less prepared for a different system, for example?
Yes, I can try. Um, here in Brazil, we have our classes around 50 or 60 students, something like that. And the professor is teaching us with a computer or a slide or a PowerPoint presentation, and then in the most of times we can just raise our hands and say, "Oh, professor, I didn't understand very well. Can you repeat it again?" Or we can just do a commentary around that. But there in Russia, it is not possible. We have lectures. Lectures are when there is all the students from that semester, around 30 groups of around 10 students, something like that. So the that room is kind of full of students, and there is one teacher with a microphone, and then they do the explanation. So it's a lecture. You have to listen that and do your notes, but you cannot raise your hand and do a question, something like that. You have to wait until you have the practice class about that topic. So in the practice class about that topic, you arrive before the teacher, always, and then they come. We just get up, and then she or he will look at your lab coats and your nails and see if everything's correct there. And then he or she say, "Sit down." We sit down, and then he or she has a list of our names, and then they say, "Oh, De Castro Bastos Paula." So it's me. So I get up, and then he or she will ask me a question about that topic of the day. So I have to answer, or sometimes he or she will just ask me, "Come here in the blackboard and just draw a scheme about aortic valve," or something like that. And then I had to do it, and if I can't, so I get 0. The notes are about 0 to 5. 5 it's the best, and 0 it's the worst. So if you get too much zeros, you cannot do the major at the end of the semester. So it's that is the biggest difference about here in Brazil, because there in Russia you are evaluated each class. Each class they evaluate you. It's not only in the major. Like here in Brazil we have classes every day, but we are not evaluated with notes or oral tests or something like that. But there in Russia, you are evaluated every day, and if you are not good enough, you cannot do your major. If you don't do your major, you will not pass the semester. And also in Russia, and I think also in the United States, I don't know, but in Russia you have the tests, the exams. The exams are in the final of that subject. For example, anatomy exam. So you have anatomy exam in the end of the semester, for example, that you have the deadline that you can do that exam. If you don't do the exam or if you are not approved, you need to redo this subject. You will not pass to the next semester or to the next year. Here in Brazil, we don't do the exams, we just do the majors. You do an exam if you are not approved in the major. So it's the biggest difference I can tell you right now.
I believe from what you've spoken that the greatest difference between what you call majors and tests are the subjects covered. In Russia, apparently, in the end of the semester, you have a specific test that covers all the subjects that has been taught throughout the entire semester. Whereas here in Brazil, for example, if you have like 3 tests or call them whatever we want, but if you have like 3 tests, each test will just cover the subject that has been taught from the last test until that test date. So I believe most likely this is the major difference between tests here in Brazil and in Russia, I'd say. Is it, I think I've already asked this, but does it also last 6 years in Russia, medical school?
Yes, 6 years.